Have you ever sort of looked in the mirror and had that strange feeling
Yeah.
that the person looking back isn't entirely you, more like a character you're playing?
Oh, definitely. A composite, right?
Yeah.
Built from your job title, what your parents expected, maybe even habits passed down.
Exactly. And that gap, between who you feel you are deep down and who you're, well, expected to be, that realization can be a huge turning point.
It really can. It's sort of the start of that search for authenticity.
And that fundamental tension, this conflict between our inner self and the external labels,
Yeah.
that's really the heart of what we're exploring today. We're looking at some incredibly detailed research on this.
Yes, and the research is pretty clear. For most of us, the self we operate from daily, it's largely based on this deeply conditioned template. It's about social acceptance, not necessarily genuine self-expression.
Right. And that is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to really unpack the insights and the technical research that's detailed in the Foundations of Angel Wing, Volume 1. We're peeling back the layers on self-mastery, personal transformation, getting into the real mechanics of how identity gets built, and maybe more importantly, how we can start to deprogram it.
It's fascinating stuff, but before we jump right in, it feels really important to acknowledge the people behind this volume. It's quite an undertaking.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Yeah, huge thanks are due here. First, to Dr. Chaitanya Kripalu, who is the founder and CEO of the Angel Wing, LLC.
Right.
And also to Dr. Elizabeth Berman. She's a member of Angel Wing's mastermind group and a dedicated presenter of this material.
Okay.
And critically, to Sachin Karnik, he's the researcher who really did all the heavy lifting, performing the essential background research for the Foundations of Angel Wing, Volume 1.
It's good to recognize that foundation. Their collective work is really the framework for, well, everything we're discussing today.
Exactly. It provides that complex structure.
And, this research volume, it doesn't really sugarcoat things. It lays out a premise that might feel a bit uncomfortable at first.
Which is?
That the identity we cling to, the one we defend every day, it's mostly an illusion, a construct, a very functional one maybe, but still a construct.
Right. So the path to self-mastery, according to this viewer, isn't about building a better personality construct.
No, exactly. It's more like an excavation, a technical process of digging down to find the true self that's been buried under all these layers put there, well, basically since birth.
Okay, so let's start digging. Where does this construction process begin? How does our authentic identity get so obscured?
Well, the research points squarely at something called societal conditioning. That seems to be the primary mechanism.
Right. Societal conditioning. Let's spend a moment on that because it sounds like the engine driving this whole process.
It really does. The volume defines it as the way external expectations, fears, ideals, ideas about success, beauty, what's good or bad, get projected onto our developing minds.
And usually before we even have the ability to filter them critically, right? Like when we're kids.
Exactly. It happens because fundamentally we're social creatures. We need connection. We don't pop out with a fully formed self.
Our first sense of identity is sort of mirrored back at us from others, parents, teachers.
Yeah, and if you're told often enough, you're the smart one or you're the shy one or you're trouble, that reflection starts to feel like reality.
But the problem, as the research really emphasizes, is that this reflection is almost always distorted. It's filtered through whatever standards are dominant in that environment.
Parental biases, peer pressure, societal norms, and now, increasingly, the weird standards of social media.
Absolutely. The result, and I think this is a great phrase from the volume, is a collage of borrowed perceptions.
A collage. Okay. Yeah. But here's where I push back a little. Isn't some of this just learning how to fit in, adapting to the whim? Where's the line between that healthy adaptation and creating a false self?
That's a really important question. And the research distinguishes this based on consciousness, essentially. Healthy adaptation involves conscious choice. This collage of self we're talking about, it's mostly accumulated unconsciously.
Ah, okay. So it's the stuff we absorb without realizing it.
Precisely. Through what the research calls key external influences. Think about media, TV, YouTube, Google search results even. They're constantly feeding us narratives about what beauty is, what success looks like, what makes someone good.
Right. And it's not just occasional messages. The volume talks about it being a constant bombardment. We're taking in what they call mental clutter.
From sensory input, lessons, media. It all piles up. And it's not just noise, it actively shapes the identity we think is ours.
So this accumulation process, this collage building, directly leads to what the book calls the mechanisms of obscuration. Basically, how the real self gets buried.
Yeah, they frame it pretty starkly as the imprisonment because you're constantly measuring yourself against these external definitions. The authentic you gets buried beneath layers of should and must.
So you stop acting from your core and start performing.
Exactly. Performing to meet criteria that often don't even align with what you truly need or want.
And the cost of keeping up that performance, it's huge, right? Always looking for validation, for proof that the costume fits.
Which leads us directly to the concept of the false identity. The research defines this as identifying with those external constructs, the job, the roles, the expectations, so much that they completely hide your true nature.
So your self-worth gets tangled up in things that are inherently unstable, like your job title or how many likes you get or what your partner thinks today.
Precisely. And that sets up this paradox the research calls the trap of external validation.
Okay, explain that.
Well, conforming to societal conditioning seems to offer security, right? Fit in, and you belong.
Yeah.
But the research argues it actually guarantees perpetual dependency.
Dependency, because your sense of okayness always relies on something outside yourself.
Exactly. You can never be truly free internally if your self-worth hinges on external approval. You're always sort of tethered.
And it goes deeper, doesn't it? The research mentions how past wounds kind of dictate present actions.
Oh, definitely. If a parent made you feel inadequate or a boss dismissed your ideas, you might unconsciously keep seeking validation now to compensate for that old hurt. That's self-sabotage, really.
And that keeps us stuck in what they call constraining belief systems. These old patterns just limit what we think is possible for ourselves.
Right, so the big takeaway here seems to be, if we let the outside world define us, we're stuck playing by its rules, living within its limitations.
Yeah. And the escape route, the way out of this imprisonment, starts with a pretty radical realization. Your identity is not the same thing as your mind.
The mind is the collector of all that clutter, but it isn't the core you. Your worth is intrinsic. It's already there.
Okay, that sounds good philosophically.
Yeah.
But how do we make that practical? How do we actually experience that separation?
That brings us right to the core revelations section of the research. Once you start seeing the bars of the cage, the false identity, you start looking for the key.
And the key involves understanding the mind itself, right? But first, let's clarify what self-mastery really means in this context.
Good point. The angel wing research defines self-mastery as essentially liberation. Liberation from those constraining belief systems we just talked about, and achieving real control over your mental and emotional state.
Control meaning suppression.
No, not suppression. It's more about choosing how you engage with your thoughts and emotions rather than being swept away by them. The research actually looks at this in terms of people who achieve this state conserve a measurable amount of mental energy.
Interesting. Okay, so the absolute linchpin here, maybe the biggest insight in the volume, is this idea: the mind is not the self.
Yes, that distinction is crucial. The mind is vital for navigating the world, obviously, but it's not the totality of your consciousness. Recognizing that separation is what allows you to transcend its limiting stories.
And this helps break what the research calls mind identification. What exactly is that?
Mind identification is basically seeing yourself as completely inseparable from your thoughts and physical sensations, interpreting everything through the mind's narrative, often based on the past.
Okay, give me an example. How does that play out?
Well, the volume gives a powerful example related to chronic pain. They studied people where the actual physical inflammation had gone down, but the brain activity linked to the memory of the pain, the trauma of it, was still firing intensely.
So the mind was still telling the story of I am in pain, even when the physical cause was reduced.
Exactly. It keeps replaying that loop, interpreting new, maybe harmless sensations through the old lens of suffering. And that can actually hinder the body's ability to fully heal because the mind insists the injury defines the present reality.
Wow. The mind becomes like a broken record of past trauma projected onto the present.
Precisely. So to break free from that, we need to understand how the mind actually works. The research goes into a lot of detail on the structure and function of the mind.
Okay, let's start with the structure. What does that refer to?
The structure is basically the mental space where thoughts appear. And the key point here is that most thoughts aren't original or even related to the present moment. The research suggests something startling, that for the average conditioned adult, something like 80% of daily thoughts are just recycled interpretations of past data. Old experiences, old beliefs, rising up from the subconscious.
80%. That's
Yeah.
staggering. So most of our mental energy is just spent rerunning old programs we're barely present.
No, it seems that way, according to this research, which leads to the function. The function is how we engage with those thoughts that pop up.
Do we just let them run wild?
Yeah, do we let one worry spiral into another, connecting a missed deadline to a childhood failing to a fear about next year, creating this chaotic mental web? Or can we learn to steer them, direct them towards clarity?
And the danger is identifying with every thought that floats by.
Right, that leads to fragmented thinking, mental exhaustion, you name it. Self-mastery in this view is about becoming the observer, like watching a play instead of being an actor swept up in the drama.
Okay? Becoming the observer. And that's critical because these mental dramas have real physical consequences, right? The mind-body connection.
Absolutely fundamental. The research details this intricate interplay. An imbalanced mind, one caught in these loops, directly leads to measurable physical issues. Let's talk about the stress cascade.
Yeah, what happens physiologically when the mind perceives threat? Even if it's not like a tiger chasing you, but maybe just an email.
The response can be remarkably similar. The fight-or-flight mechanism kicks in, the volume details the neurophysiology, you get this instant cascade of chemicals, primarily surges of cortisol and adrenaline.
And cortisol, the long-term stress hormone, that's really damaging over time, isn't it?
Yeah.
What kind of physical symptoms did the research link directly to this mental trigger?
Things like rapid heart rate, shallow breathing, that tight feeling in your chest, muscle tension. Your body essentially goes into high alert, burning through energy reserves.
Okay.
And here's a crucial point the research highlights. Most people focus only on the symptom. The headache, the chest pain, the fatigue. They don't connect it back to the underlying mental pattern that triggered the whole cascade.
So they're looking for an external fix, a pill, maybe the diet change, for what's fundamentally an internal wiring issue.
That's exactly it. You're trying to patch the leaks without addressing the faulty plumbing, so to speak. When those stress hormones are constantly flooding your system, you're putting wear and tear on everything.
It really drives home that self-mastery isn't some kind of, luxury spiritual practice. It's essential for basic physical health and well-being.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so if the conditioned mind is the engine driving this depletion, how do we actually start to, well, rewire it?
This brings us to the practical tools section. The volume outlines a detailed process for active deprogramming. And it starts by understanding these deep, often invisible patterns of subconscious programming.
Right, let's define that term, subconscious programming.
Okay. It's defined as these ingrained, almost automatic reflexes.
Huh?
They can be emotional, physical, even physiological reactions that have developed over time.
And the research suggests this programming can start incredibly early.
Yeah, possibly even in the womb. The idea is the developing nervous system can kind of absorb the mother's stress patterns. So these reactions, maybe it's a headache that always pops up in certain situations, or sudden energy drainage, or that knot in your stomach, they become automatic conditioned responses.
Wow, so less like conscious thoughts and more like biological tripwires. The volume uses this analogy of a psychological film constantly playing in the background, driving these reactions.
Yeah, exactly. An involuntary movie that keeps repeating.
Hmm.
And to change the ending, you need specific tools to disrupt it.
Okay, so what's the main tool?
The primary technical tool presented is mindfulness and awareness. The goal is to break that automatic chain reaction. The thought triggering the emotion, triggering the feeling, triggering the old programming.
Right. Mindfulness creates that little gap, doesn't it? That
Yeah.
pause.
Precisely. The research calls it creating a few vital seconds. And in those seconds, instead of the old knee-jerk reaction firing off, you give a different part of your brain a chance to step in.
The prefrontal cortex, or PFC, can you explain what that is for listeners?
Sure. The PFC is the part of the brain right behind your forehead. It's associated with our higher functions, rational thought, decision-making, planning, emotional regulation.
So normally in a stress situation, the brain might default to the amygdala, the fast-acting alarm center.
Exactly. Fight or flight. It bypasses the slower, more thoughtful PFC. Mindfulness is like building the mental muscle to pause, to consciously direct the signal to the PFC instead.
Ah, so those vital seconds are literally buying neurological time. Time to recognize, okay, this feeling is intense, but is the threat real right now, or is this just an echo from the past?
Yes. It stops you from projecting past hurts onto the present and worrying about future catastrophes based on old data. And this naturally leads into mastering triggers and non-reactivity.
Okay, triggers. This is a big one. The research makes a really bold claim here, doesn't it?
It does. It basically says triggers aren't the external events. The person cutting you off in traffic isn't the real trigger. That event is neutral.
So the trigger is our reaction. The sudden anger, the feeling of being disrespected.
Exactly. That reaction comes from our internal subconscious conditioning, maybe about control or fairness or respect. The root of the reactivity, the volume argues, is always within us.
Oof, that's challenging. Because it takes away the option of blaming the outside world. If the problem's internal, the solution has to be internal too.
Right. It puts the responsibility and the power back in our hands. So what are the unhealthy reactions we need to overcome? The typical fight or flight stuff.
The research highlights two main maladaptive responses. First is active aggression, yelling, demanding, getting confrontational.
Okay.
The second is the opposite, freezing shock, shutting down, withdrawing completely, unable to respond.
Right. So the goal isn't either of those extremes. It's achieving this non-reactive state.
Yes, a stable, centered state. And you get there through things like controlled breathing, practiced cognitive techniques. It's not about being emotionless or cold.
It's about choosing not to give away your power, your energy to the external situation. Right?
Precisely. And there's a practical application here I found really interesting about how your state can influence others.
Oh, yeah. The idea that if you stay calm when someone else is agitated, you can actually help their rational brain, their PFC, come back online.
Exactly. You move the interaction from pure reactivity towards something more solution-focused. You're literally co-regulating their nervous system with your own self-mastery. Pretty amazing.
It is. Okay, so once we use awareness and non-reactivity to disrupt the old patterns, we need to install something new, the process of new programming. How does that work?
It's described as a very deliberate, consistent effort. You have to actively dissociate the current situation from the old baggage, the past programming, and then consciously install new, more beneficial habits and responses.
And this isn't just think positive thoughts.
No, it's more technical than that. It requires dedicated practice, like building muscle. The research mentions specific methodologies to help create these new neural pathways. Things like site kinesiology and energy techniques like tapping.
Okay, can you unpack those a bit? How does the volume describe their mechanics?
Sure. Site kinesiology, as presented here, seems to be about identifying where in the body's energy system these negative emotional patterns or adverse circuits are stored, like mapping the psychological film.
Okay, and once you've mapped it,
Then techniques like EFT or tapping come in. The description involves stimulating specific meridian points used in acupuncture while consciously focusing on the disturbing thought or memory.
right, I've heard of this. What's the proposed mechanism?
The theory outlined in the volume, supported by their initial findings, is that this combination, the physical stimulation plus the mental focus, sends a calming signal directly to the amygdala, the brain's fear center.
So it decouples the emotional charge from the memory or trigger.
Essentially, yes. You're signaling safety to the brain while confronting the distress source. This allows for a rapid deprogramming effect, making space to install the new, constructive programming.
Fascinating. You're basically rewriting the subconscious script at both a mental and physiological level.
That's the idea. And complementing these specific techniques, the research also introduces a philosophical concept to aid this whole process. Wu Wei.
Wu Wei, from Taoism, right?
Oh, yeah.
Often translated as non-action.
Yeah, but the meaning here is deeper than just doing nothing. It's more like effortless action or actionless action. The interpretation in the angel wing research frames it as moving with the flow of life.
Like water going around a rock instead of trying to smash through it.
Exactly. Accepting what is, allowing things to unfold, which paradoxically allows for more creativity and helps transcend those rigid mental limits we impose. It's shifting from fighting life to flowing with it mindfully.
Okay, so mastering these tools, embracing this flow,
Yeah.
it leads to something more profound than just, say, feeling less stressed.
Yeah.
The volume makes a key distinction between transformation versus change.
Yes, this is really important. Change, as they define it, is temporary. It can be reversed. Think about going on a diet. You change your habits, lose weight, but then often revert back.
Right, so transformation is...
Permanent, irreversible. It's like an awakening, a fundamental shift in perspective, breaking free from illusion. The classic analogy used is the caterpillar becoming a butterfly.
Once you're the butterfly, you can't really go back to being a caterpillar.
Exactly. There's no capacity or even desire to return to that limited state.
So the ultimate aim isn't just feeling better sometimes, but reaching this state of, like, constant calm equanimity, unshaken by whatever's happening externally.
That seems to be the goal. And a major benefit of that state is energy conservation. If you're not constantly reacting, fighting mental battles, getting caught in emotional ups and downs, you free up an enormous amount of energy.
And that conserved energy allows for
What?
a broader perspective.
Yes, leading towards the realization of interconnectedness. This is where the focus shifts from just the individual to the collective.
Okay. The idea here is that we're all fundamentally energy beings.
That's the core assertion. Our physical bodies are temporary vehicles, but the underlying energy, our consciousness, doesn't die. It just transforms. This points to a fundamental similarity, a shared energetic nature beneath the surface appearances.
So if we're all connected at that energetic level, what does that mean for all the differences we see, beliefs, backgrounds, personalities?
The research suggests those differences obscure a deeper truth, that the core spirit within everyone actually embodies the same fundamental qualities: love, compassion, happiness, joy.
Universal commonalities.
Exactly. But our constructed identities, our focus on politics, religion, social status, all that mental clutter hides this basic unity. Recognizing that shared essence of spirits is presented as the key to genuine compassion and understanding.
If individuals start to realize this interconnectedness must have ripple effects, right, leading towards societal transformation.
That's the logical extension. The world we see is essentially a reflection of the collective human consciousness. So change the inner world, and the outer world will eventually reflect that change.
Which requires systemic change, too. The volume is quite direct about this, isn't it?
Very. It calls for actively dismantling systems built on hierarchy where things like wealth or education level are used to define a person's worth.
And shifting major paradigms, economic, educational, political, away from competition and division.
Towards collaboration, equality, mutual respect. You asked earlier about education. The suggestion is moving beyond just academic scores.
To include what? Emotional intelligence.
Self-awareness.
Exactly. And global citizenship. Fostering creativity not just for personal gain or competition, but for collective well-being. Using our incredible mental capacity to solve shared problems like environmental issues or conflict, rather than creating more division.
Which ultimately brings us back to the individual experience, doesn't it? To contentment and liberation from suffering. Yes. The research strongly posits that most of our suffering isn't caused by external events themselves, but by our mind's reaction to them.
Through negative associations or getting overly attached to things that are inherently temporary.
Precisely. Attaching our happiness to a specific outcome, a relationship, a possession, it's setting ourselves up for suffering because those things will change.
So, simplifying needs, recognizing that basics like shelter, food, clothing are sufficient. That reduces the internal conflict.
It can dramatically lessen the grip of materialism and the constant striving that fuels so much anxiety. Contentment arises when you realize your core spirit already embodies joy. The suffering's the overlay, the mental noise. Clear the noise, and contentment is what remains.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We started with that uncomfortable feeling of wearing a mask, conditioned identity,
Built from external pressures and expectations.
and journeyed through the technical process of watching the mind, understanding its mechanisms, and using tools like mindfulness and specific techniques to deprogram those old reactions.
Leading towards uncovering that authentic self. Realizing our worth isn't external, it's intrinsic.
Right. It's quite a journey laid out in this research.
And it's crucial to remember this isn't about reaching some static endpoint where life is suddenly perfect.
Yeah.
Self-mastery isn't avoiding challenges or just seeking pleasure.
It's more about maintaining balance, a steady inner state regardless of the outer weather.
Exactly. It's a continuous evolution, a commitment to awareness and growth that lasts, well, a lifetime. Seeing every experience, pleasant or unpleasant, as simply information without letting it destabilize your core self.
Really emphasizes gradually pushing our boundaries, trusting that inner knowing, that intuition, more than the conditioned responses. The conditioning is strong, no doubt, but the power of conscious choice, that non-reactive moment, that seems to be where freedom lies. So to leave our listeners with something to really chew on, building on everything we've discussed from the foundations of Angel Wing, Volume 1, here's a final thought. If those external circumstances, those triggers, only have power over you because of old programming, because of echoes from the past, what's just one habitual reaction you notice in yourself?
Could be anything.
Yeah, that knee-jerk defensiveness maybe, or that sudden wave of anxiety when criticized, or maybe that automatic voice of self-criticism. What's one reaction you could simply observe today and consciously choose not to feed, choose to drop it just for now and reclaim that bit of personal energy?
That single moment of conscious observation and choice, that really is the doorway to mastery, isn't it?